Welcome to the LOG series. LOG stands for League of the Genuine. This platform was created to start and have conversations around counterfeits and substandard products. We believe that there is a lot of information around this subject, information that could save your life, information that could save your business, our environment, our economy, and that of the lives of our children and the generations to come. Now, last week we had a discussion, we actually concluded our discussion on water, so counterfeits in the water sector. Today we open up a whole new conversation around petroleum. Now, petroleum is very wide. We're talking fuel, we're talking gas, we're talking lubes. And my guest here, who is the expert, are you the expert?
I'm the informed one.
You're the informed one.
Yes.
Fred Muwema is back with us, and he works with the Anti-Counterfeit Network Africa. He's going to be talking to us about counterfeits in the petroleum sector. But today we want to focus our discussion on fuel for starters. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachel.
So you drive a car, a very nice looking car.
I'm just learning.
You're
now.
just learning?
Yes.
Okay. What fuel do you use? And I guess why? Why that particular fuel?
Okay, I use, they call it top of the range, I don't know, V-Power. I just learned a few weeks ago that actually V-Power is not
as
any different from the other fuel, except that it has some special treatment or additives that are added to it from here. It doesn't come as V-Power. It is treated here and given some special qualities that enhance the engine performance and so on. So I use V-Power.
V-Power.
Yes.
Okay, and you have been in this, I don't want to call it a fight, but in this engagement around counterfeits in different sectors. Last week we concluded on water. Today it's petroleum. What has been your experience in fighting counterfeits in the petroleum sector?
First of all, I need to confirm, yes, we have had a lot of work going in the fight against fakes or counterfeits in petroleum products and byproducts. I need to say that it's one of the more complicated areas to tackle because I think virtually every person, unless maybe you're living in a cave, but every person walking the face of this earth has an encounter with directly with a fuel product or a fuel byproduct, and because of the because it's a fast-moving consumer good that we use on the daily, Ugandans will consume about almost 6 million liters per day. Okay, so it is difficult because there are a lot of motivations, points for motivation for people to fake, to try and make a quick profit. And because the product has got unique qualities. For example, this is the only product that you buy without inspection. I know you do a lot of shopping, you go to the supermarket, you have the opportunity to look
at ingredients.
But when you take fuel for your car, do you have an opportunity?
I don't even see it.
So it's a very unique product that is very easy to buy because in a minute you go to the station, pay, and they put your 20K has the fuel in. But as easy as it is to purchase, it's also very easy to be duped and to lose money and to buy fake fuel in this case. So because of that, it is quite engaging and quite complex to deal with, and I do not know that you can actually erase it completely. But what we are doing here is to assist the viewer to be equipped with knowledge and information to tackle this vice better. Because it's not about to end, but at least you need to be informed and make better choices with where you buy and how you handle fuel.
Yes. And I think later on the show we're going to be talking about how, as a consumer, I can protect myself in terms, protect myself from fake fuel or air, as it is called? I don't know if those are two, those are the same thing.
Air is one of the components that makes fuel fake.
Yeah.
In the sense that you go to buy 1 liter and then you buy 0.9 of a liter. But first of all, you didn't know that it was 0.9. And because
the machine probably showed 1 liter.
Yeah, because the calibration, the machine has been tampered with. So it will show 1 liter, but it stopped at 0.9 and you thought you took a liter. And this is very important to viewers out there because we are very price sensitive.
Yes.
We like a bargain. Can you imagine we bargain also for fuel?
For fuel.
Here is 100 shillings less and that's 100 more, so let me buy here. But in doing so, we are losing out on many fronts. We don't get value for money. We are damaging our cars. And giving business to the mechanics who, because fuel that is adulterated, as we shall speak here, actually damages your engine.
The vehicle,
and the lifespan of the engine. I am sure as we go on with these conversations, we shall have people dealing in the sector also speaking to this and confirming probably what you've been experiencing and have heard. Why does my car break down?
All the time, yes, after fuel.
Why does it refuse to start in the morning? Things like that.
So, because we understand that counterfeits happen in all sectors, and this is a subject that, everyone must pay attention to, what's the difference between counterfeits in the petroleum sector and in others, say food or cosmetics?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know whether you know of some counterfeiter who opened a refinery and produced their own fuel or something like that.
I don't know.
That's the biggest difference. Whereas somebody can open a small cottage industry with a small machine and make any product, make bread or make Vaseline or tires. With petroleum products, the production, the manufacturing is centralized. You have the production of petroleum products as an intergovernment project or a government project. Very expensive, millions of dollars to set up, for example, a refinery to produce. You know that the refinery project for Uganda, which they want to do in Hoima, I think is upwards of $4 billion. So not many people can afford this kind of money to produce. But that should not make you celebrate that you don't have fakes in fuel. The difference between fuel and other products that are faked is that the fuel, when it comes onto the market, like our fuel in Uganda is procured through Mombasa, most of it, about 70% of it. That fuel comes from a central place, let's say Saudi Arabia, and the big tankers ship this fuel up to the port, and then at the port you have the discharge, evacuation of that product or into a pipeline. For the case of Uganda, we have a pipeline, I think, up to Eldoret or Nakuru. That's where many of the retailers and distributors of fuel in Uganda will pick it from Eldoret, and then the trucks drive up to Busia, or sometimes the trucks come all the way from Dar es Salaam to Mutukula, and there's a plan to have the extension of the pipeline to Kisumu, so that we can carry the fuel from Kisumu by water to Port Bell. So up to that point, you don't have a lot of issues because that is controlled, a few players. The problem is that from the point of access, either at Eldoret or until it reaches our reserves here, because when it comes from Kenya, it doesn't go straight to your dealer or the favorite petrol station where you buy. No, it will go to the licensed distributors. It will go to Shell, Cobil, whoever it is, and then those entities have storage facilities as well. Now that's where issues can start coming up if monitoring the quality control at a dealer is not good enough, that is when you will have issues to do either with direct contamination. There are cases where you will have adulteration with kerosene. Okay, the one used for turnover for the lighting. Kerosene is mixed a lot with diesel, especially diesel.
Is that to increase the quantities?
Yes, of course.
More money.
To increase the quantity, it's because the price of kerosene is lower, and the price of diesel is higher. So if you reduce, if from a liter of diesel you put 3/4 diesel and you put 1/4 kerosene, and yet you still sell it
at the same price of diesel.
So you make a bigger margin.
Yeah.
So that's where the problems start coming in. And I want to say here that a lot of the quality issues with fuel are between the depot from where the fuel is coming. You see those trucks?
Yes.
For those companies that are moving the fuel to the local retailer station.
Yes.
A lot of games are played there and also at the station itself. Because supposing you're getting the genuine product, you know, a station does not buy only petrol. A station will buy petrol, diesel, and kerosene. So you send a truck to pick this product, those three. Now, when the fuel reaches your favorite station, if the owner of the station or the manager or the employees are unethical, they will mix
at that
diesel
with
the kerosene, and then it goes in the tank, and then you queue up and you order for diesel, but you're given maybe 70% diesel. The rest is kerosene. But also a lot of the contamination is acquired during the storage. Storage both at the depot, I don't know to what extent, but I'm familiar with contamination in the underground storage at the stations. The storage is supposed to be secure. I think most of the tanks should be 3-layered, you know, strong steel, iron and so on. But with all these mushrooming stations you have, you should be asking yourself, is the quality of the storage tank in some of these single pump stations that you see, if the guy cannot afford to have the quality pump to be able to even put pavers and have clean drainage and so on at a station, so will they afford actually to have a quality tank down that is rust proof
to make sure the fuel is stored well?
So you then get water outside the fuels. Water is the biggest contaminant in our fuels. Water. And a lot of the water, Rachel, is not fixed that somebody goes and pours water directly. No, like right now, we having a rainy season. We have a lot of storm water. So not only is the storm water causing traffic jams, a lot of this storm water actually gets into the underground tanks. Why? Because many of the tanks are old. They don't have, maybe they have issues with the valves. And even when you leave the water alone, which can penetrate into the tanks, we are in a tropical climate. We have a lot of humidity. What does that mean? It means that if the handling of the tanks is not proper, for example, a tank ideally should be kept full. Because
to avoid that
because if
space,
there's a gap, that space there, it can attract some moisture, okay? And you know where there is moisture and so on, then there's condensation, and then it turns into water.
Drops of water.
Drops of water. So you have bits of that water mixing with the product itself. And as you know, petrol or petroleum products and water, they will not mix. But the danger is if you put it in your car. Correct. That's when you get the issues. The car starts jerking. it loses power. Sometimes as you're driving, the check engine will come on. But eventually it damages your engine. Eventually you have a knock. So from my experience, we have seen that a lot of the issues of contamination of the fuel that we take is caused by human factors and negligence in handling and storage, transportation. And the thing is that most consumers of fuel, I don't know that there is any company selling fuel products that has invested in consumer education and information. Maybe if you've had, what we see a lot is promotion of the product, or this is a new fuel, it's the best, please come to our station. But we don't have any client information, any consumer information
on
being
what really
given
happens,
to the consumer. For example, at the stations, I know it as a best practice that at most of these big oil companies, they should be able to check every day what is the quality of fuel that we have at this particular station as of today. But how many companies have you had that inform consumers that when you come to a station, you can ask for a quality marshal or a supervisor around and say, I heard my friend came here last week, they took fuel and their engine knocked, or there were issues. Can I look at the quality of your fuel? Each station is supposed to have somebody who should attend to you, get a sample of the fuel at the station, and then they check the density and check all the other properties, and then tell you, Madam, the fuel we have at this station is okay.
The quality,
but
nobody
is asking or telling us to demand for this information.
We don't know that we can demand for that information.
So what we are telling you on this show is that actually you have a right to ask to know the quality of fuel that is sold at a particular station, because the quality of fuel can change at any time. If it rains and there's a leakage somewhere, the fuel could be affected today, but by Friday it could be better. So I think what we are looking to do basically is, we may not stop completely the problem, because it's a huge problem, but we think that to a large extent, if the consumer, if you who is purchasing the fuel have got this information, then you can contribute to the eradication or lessening of the effects of contamination in fuel, and basically make life better for you and everybody. Other than being in ignorance.
For sure. And I think you are beginning to open our eyes to a lot of things. I think the one thing that scares me the most is this is a product that we don't see. And so it's even more imperative that we need to ask for information, or at least at the very least the traders need to offer this information to their consumers on how it's kept, the quality of the fuel, so that we are informed and we are at peace that what is getting into our vehicles is clean. But what you mentioned something about petrol stations mushrooming over the last maybe 10 or so years. Back in the day there were a few. I remember one specific one called UPET. I don't see it anymore. What happened? How come we have so many petrol stations, and what does that mean for the consumer?
Okay, for the case of Uganda, we have what they call a deregulated petroleum supply sector. Deregulated meaning we moved away from maybe 30 years ago when we had 3 or 4 players. Some of you remember Mobil, we used to have Ajib, Shell, Total, Caltex. Those guys used to take up 70-80% of the market. So you didn't have the small stations. I've seen some stations called Camel, others are called Dog or whatever. We now have, so 20 years or so, 25 years ago, the government, in pursuit of the liberalization policy, which we now have, meaning it's not controlled, have as many players, let market forces decide. That's why we do not even have a price control. Kenya has. Kenya is mixed regulation and deregulation. In Kenya, they fix the price of petrol. In Rwanda, they fix the price. Here, we don't. The price here is determined by the market.
That market, yeah.
Okay, basically, if you guys sit and say, today we are going to quote 3,700, and that's what they quote. And do you have a say?
No,
as a consumer, you don't have a say. But why do we have so many stations? It's because of the liberalization. UPET was a government company or corporation which had come into that space to procure fuel and supply to the country. But as you know, government is not the best business person, so they failed to run it. So they now divested that responsibility to private players. For example, we have a big issue with storage. I can assure you that we do not have fuel supplies for more than a week or so. We don't have. The storage facility, I think, maybe one active one we have in Jinja. We had Nakasongola, all those were destroyed during the war. Kasese. We're now building, I think, somewhere in Impiji, Buloba, storage. We don't have storage. So for government, it made sense to allow private players. So now the idea is you are given a license, but then the government also puts pressure on you to have storage for at least 10 days.
That's the minimum. Yeah.
So can you store? So the storage, a lot of the storage we have in the country is in the hands of private players. So if this company brings and stores, so collectively that's what we have. So many players are a result of the liberalization, like I have said, but in respect of the counterfeit question, if you ask me, I think to a large extent, the opening up created more opportunities
for counterfeit
to thrive. And that's why more than ever, we now have a major problem of fuel adulteration. And I need to emphasize here that it's not just adulteration mixing with kerosene that's a problem for the fuel. And it's not only contamination, that is water that is mixing with the fuel, but we also have issues to do with smuggling. There is a lot of product that comes in that is tax exempt, government fuels, a lot of those things. And it is smuggled, or it just does not pay taxes. And then it is smuggled and so whereas that fuel could be of the right quality. Because you see, when we are on this program talking about counterfeits, one of the key effects of counterfeiting is loss of public revenue.
Yeah.
A counterfeit, in part, is also that product that is dumped or bypasses the normal channel and then gets onto the market. Okay? It may actually be a genuine product. So I think those are the 3-4 areas. The undersupply, you go to get a liter, they give you 3/4. The adulteration, mixing with kerosene, the contamination with water
from the storage,
and then with the storage. Yes.
Yeah. We are going to take a quick break. Interesting discussion on fuel and counterfeiting in the fuel sector. If you have a question, do let us know in the comment section, and we are going to be happy to answer it. We'll be right back. We are back. This is the League of the Genuine series. Today we are talking all things petroleum, but specifically focusing on fuel. And before the break, Fred, you were telling us about the liberalization of the sector and how so many petrol stations have had the opportunity now to sell fuel. And that has sort of, I feel like it has opened us up to counterfeits, for one, to fuel that is not stored properly. Is there anything that the government did to protect consumers? If I consume fuel that is adulterated, is there somewhere I can go and report, maybe in simple lay terms?
Okay, first of all, let us not demonize completely liberalization. I think it also did some good thing. We got a lot of local capacity of local players, entrepreneurs also coming into the sector. It was no longer a monopoly of just foreigners, if you like. It created employment, increased taxable activity, so some revenue went up. But on the counterfeit front, it created a problem because if the Uganda National Bureau of Standards was having trouble controlling 10 or 15 players who had maybe 100 petrol stations or 150 countrywide, how about asking the Uganda National Bureau of Standards and the Ministry of Energy, in particular the Directorate of Petroleum Supplies, how about asking them to regulate or monitor more than 2,000 petrol stations in the country? How about asking them to license, monitor, and regulate 70 players? It is difficult. Difficult because we know for a fact that there has not been the same kind of increment in the budget of the UNBS, for example. We know that we have not expanded the resource base, human capital, and budget provision for the Ministry of Energy to do its surveillance and monitoring work. That's why you have seen in the past couple of months or years the ministry publishing a list of petrol stations or stations that are operating without a license. I think Uganda is very interesting. We probably are among the few countries that would publish a list of people engaging in criminal activities, but not publish alongside that list of their picture going to jail. You know, we publish the stations that are not operating with a license.
So they are continuing with business.
But we didn't publish, at least publish pictures of these stations being shut down. Of the proprietor answering charges before a magistrate or judge on why they have broken the law and sold such an important everyday product without a license, or selling it in circumstances that are dubious and unauthorized. But so the liberalization has not been matched with liberalization and increment in capacity of the government regulators. That's why I think some of you have seen, I think it is Shell and Total, they have mobile vans, they call them labs. And when we did some investigation, we found that these vans have equipment in there, but they go to the outlets of Shell or Total, take samples of fuel and check if it conforms to standard. Why did the private player have to do this? Because the capacity of the National Bureau of Standards is inadequate. And even sometimes, we know for a fact that sometimes National Bureau of Standards will pick a sample from this station and supposedly take it for testing to see if the fuel is not adulterated, to see if it's okay. But your guess is as good as mine. Many times the sample that is picked here is not the sample that is tested. So you have results which show positive or good quality, but it doesn't match what that station is selling. And so you have cases where people will complain that I have taken fuel from this station and my car started jerking, and it was not, the combustion of the fuel wasn't good, so I got issues, my plugs or my filter. And yet that station will claim that our fuel was tested by UNBS or whoever it was, and we are good. So liberalization helped to increase access of fuel. If you're older, you will know that supply of fuel was also an issue a lot of times. We didn't have enough supply and access. But these days, you can get fuel virtually any day of the night or day. And you don't have to drive 50 miles or there's a station in every corner. That has
its benefits.
Its benefits. But for the counterfeit question, it made it worse.
So Fred, what I hear you saying is basically we are doomed. Because at the testing level, there's tampering there. you know, there are all these petrol stations. UNBS doesn't have the sort of capacity to regulate. All they are doing is, you know, posting pictures of petrol stations that have no licenses. So me as the consumer, I guess it is my mandate to protect myself.
I think we are doomed if we don't have this kind of conversation.
For sure.
Because this conversation gives hope. This conversation gives knowledge. This conversation equips us with information, either to take action on our own or to force those who should take action to act. Because truth be told, nothing, I need to repeat this, nothing is being done by way of consumer education by any of the brands.
That's an untapped area.
Nothing is being done. And I can tell you that if the consumer was informed, they say that uninformed consumer is an empowered consumer. If the consumer was informed, the consumer would not accept to provide a market for adulterated fuel. But the consumer is providing a market for adulterated fuel because
they're ignorant.
They're ignorant.
Don't know.
They do not know that they are actually building up a strong but harmful industry that not only affects their wealth but also their health. So I think the call here to everybody out there, and by the way, when I'm talking about consumers, we are not restricted to those who own cars. Because you might feel that because you've not yet bought a car, the talk about adulterated fuel does not concern you. But it does very much. Because the part of a vehicle that emits the exhaust fumes is not with the driver of the car. Actually, it's at the back. Okay? What they call the tailgate of the car. And if you've taken adulterated fuel, it will carry a lot of carbon monoxide. Now, most of us, if you did some elementary science,
you have an idea what,
you know,
the dangers
oxygen,
of
carbon monoxide and so on. You know that carbon monoxide is poisonous, it's dangerous. Now, a lot of adulterated fuel, for example, kerosene, has higher levels of carbon monoxide, which we do not support animal life and plant life. Now, many of those people, even who do not drive cars, are suffering the consequences of carbon monoxide
as you walk on the
poisoning.
streets. Yes.
I don't know if you felt it, especially when you're in a jam and the windows are open. I don't know if you've noticed, you get dizzy sometimes. After you've been in a jam for long, you get a headache, you get nausea and so on. It's because of carbon monoxide. And high levels of carbon monoxide consumed continuously over time is going to have a lot of adverse health adverse effects. And we need to know, because many times when these things are being spoken about, you feel very distant to the subject because it does not relate with you. But people need to understand that one of the biggest health concerns that we have at the moment is cancer. And a lot of these emissions from the fuel, heavily loaded with sulfur, have active carcinogens, which any doctor will tell you are active cancer-causing ingredients.
Gases.
So, and cancer is a very common thing these days. I don't know that there's anybody who has not lost somebody to cancer. So
Nobody.
when we are talking about contamination and adulteration of fuel, we're not talking about a remote thing that you can afford to ignore. You can't ignore it because it's causing death, it's killing you or your loved one.
Fred, I want us to talk a bit about price, because there's so much to talk about in fuel and in the petroleum sector. Our online community, who we absolutely are thankful for, sharing your comments on price vis-a-vis quality of fuel, or price vis-a-vis, or rather price versus adulterated. So does price play a role in the whole counterfeiting conversation?
By the way, when I was starting this journey on fighting counterfeits more than a decade ago, the major presumption used to be that counterfeits are cheaper, that people go for counterfeits because the genuine is expensive. Right now, I think the counterfeiters have equalized. They have scored an equalizing goal against the genuine, because the counterfeit now sells at the same price as the genuine, or just slightly lower. Some fakes actually are more expensive than the genuine. So price ceased to be a single driver of the counterfeiting culture. But in petroleum, I think price is a unique factor. Price drives adulteration of diesel because the vendor of diesel would like to make a bigger margin.
Yes.
So because of the price of diesel right now is about 3,600 as compared to the price of kerosene, which is 500, 600 shillings lower, you find that somebody who has a station and is selling diesel is going to be tempted, because of price differentiation between the two products, to actually produce and supply to you a counterfeit product in the form of diesel. So price plays a role from the supply side, but also price plays a role on the consumer. Purchasing side. You will hear that I like to take fuel at this station A and not station B, because the price at station A is 100 shillings higher, or 50 or 200 higher than the other. And chances are that the person who is offering fuel at a lower price may not be selling a genuine product. I know it's not obvious. The chances are very high that you will not be selling a genuine product, because if you look at the landed cost of the product, if you put the government taxation, which at the moment is 1,300 shillings per liter. But a lot of that price is government money. It's taxes. So if you are choosing the players of wanting to make more profits, I think the first person you need to be looking at is government.
The government.
Because Uganda has the most expensive fuel in the region. Our fuel, our diesel, for example, is about 100 shillings more expensive than Rwanda. And yet the diesel comes from Kenya and then goes down to Rwanda. Our petrol is also more than 200 shillings more expensive than Rwanda. How is that possible when the trucks go through Uganda? I think it's because of the taxation. So therefore, price as a factor cannot be ignored. Price in relation to counterfeiting also cannot be ignored, but it's not the only reason driver. But I think what we advise, irrespective of what the price is, the supplier or the place where you obtain your fuel from must be in the established channel. I think you're safer going to an established supplier, reputable company, because if you got engine problems,
you're able to go back.
It's very easy to go and
hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So there was another question around price from the online community on why different fuel stations have different prices in different locations. Actually, no, same distributor has different prices for the fuel in different locations. So somebody who stays in Ntinda gets fuel at a different price from the same petrol station as opposed to someone who stays in Bulenga.
That is very true. But whoever asked the question, if they went and did some homework, they will notice that the price differentiation and lower prices will be recorded in places where there's a lot of competition. There is a place, I think on Masaka Road, for example, from Chengera onwards. The number of stations there, small players, big players, is so high. I am sure if you went to Total or Shell, in those areas where there's a lot of competition, the price quoted by Shell or Total in that area will have to try and match the competition. So it will be lower.
Yes,
But
considerably lower.
if you went to Shell or Total in town, the price will be higher. So I think there is a way that the company tries to respond to the price sensitiveness of the particular area and then see how it balances it out. But it does not necessarily mean that that fuel is fake. That because I bought from Shell, Chengera or Total, that it was fake. A lot of times it's those dynamics on sensitivity of the price. And because the big player cannot afford not to be in that area, but because there are many other small players, so that's how they keep the price
fairly low.
Lower. That's one of the arguments that has been made. But of course, the other reason could be that maybe there are certain bad practices by some dealers who are not doing the right thing. But I know that even if we have a liberal economy, I know that the companies try to have some regulation on the price, some control.
We are out of time, but there's one last question that I would believe our viewers would want to know. You talked about this sector being unique in the sense that we can't see the product right from the time it is brought to the fuel station to the point that it enters our cars. How can I protect myself? What are some of the telltale signs of, say, a petrol station not to attempt to get fuel from? Or how do I know that my car has gotten adulterated fuel, and what can I do to protect myself?
Rachel, maybe before I even talk about that, I need to emphasize that globally there are a lot of measures that governments and regulators put in place to try and protect the public from contaminated, adulterated fuel. One of the common ones known here as fuel marking. From the point of entry of the fuel, in this case, if the fuel is coming from Kenya, the government, represented by UNBS, would hire a third party, a qualified company, to do what they call fuel marking. And at that point, in simple terms, what is done is to mark the fuel, let's say the petrol, with a chemical. For petrol in Uganda, they've been using T1, reddish in color. You mark it, and then they are able to trace and track and trace that fuel. And at any point on the way, or they will check again to see if that chemical, the right amount of chemical, is still in the tank or is still with that fuel. If they find that there is a deviation, maybe you've added some kerosene or something, the marker will not be the same, of the same strength, and that way they will be able to tell that there has been tampering with this particular fuel when it left the border. And then for the diesel, they use the T2, which is greenish bluish. However, I need to emphasize that of course the counterfeiter would also try to fake the chemical.
Tamper with the
marker. This guy is fake everything. So a lot of times the government does make changes, but somebody listening out there needs to know that if you got a shortage of fuel and sent a boda guy and he brought you black petrol, just know
that's not good.
Petrol shouldn't be black. It should be reddish, brownish. And if you're asking for the diesel, it should be bluish. Greenish. The coloring there. So those are some of the measures that are taken. But a lot of the measures are your personal endeavor or personal effort. There are many things that you can do to ensure that you do not become victim. You and your car do not become victim to adulterated fuel. And many are obvious. Of course, if you're looking out for some dingy place, single palm, selling fuel next to some kiosk selling food and so on, definitely there are issues there. Why look out for such places?
Yes.
But there are other, if you like, personal hygiene issues, the personal care and hygiene of your car. Have you seen some cars being driven around with the cover of the fuel tank off?
Yes.
For example, or it doesn't close properly. And
So it's almost
loose.
open most of the time.
That is a bad sign, because that shows that if this guy is going to drive in rain, maybe the cover doesn't fit well. Water comes in. Remember, I told you water is the biggest, outside the petroleum family, water is the biggest contaminant.
Yeah.
So please put the covers on. If you are going to take fuel at a station, like I have said, you can ask to find out what is the quality of the fuel. They should be able to tell you when they last checked and so on. Please don't go into a station to fuel if you're seeing some big tank there delivering fuel and discharging.
Yes.
Why is that not very good? Because the discharge is done at an amount of pressure, and you know, fuel by the way is a living thing. You know, fuel comes from the earth, so it also has microorganisms and so on.
Yeah.
It also grows old. Okay, so if they are offloading fuel and discharging in the container, the effect of the discharge is that the old fuel or the sediments and all those things which were down get to come up. So if pressure is going to fuel at that very point, the chances of you taking sediments and those particles
are very high.
maybe coming from the rust are extremely high. So those are some of the few things you need to look out for to ensure that you're taking safe fuel. And maybe lastly, the busier the station, the fresher the fuel. It's very nice to go to a station where the supply,
you can see,
there's new fuel being brought all the time.
Yeah.
So you have a high chance that your engine will enjoy
the benefits
good
of
fuel. So, but if you're going to a station where, and that's why those outpost stations are quite dangerous. They hold stocks of fuel for a long time because they have a car passing once in a while. So a lot of that aged fuel, you go and take some 20 liters and your car starts acting up and you're wondering what happened. So, yeah.
Thank you, Fred. I think this has been quite insightful. We're talking fuel on the League of the Genuine series conversation. We started that today. We're going to be continuing this conversation next week. Hopefully we'll get some sector players to, talk to us about fuel, talk to us about this supply chain that we've had about on the show today. And you're free to send in your questions as well to the sector players that we'll be talking to. Until next Friday, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see you next Friday.